there's heroes and villains in sports and entertainment. And I think because of my stance on COVID and maybe some other things, I've been cast as the villain, especially the last few years. If you take the right soundbite from the right thing, and it's a station that may or may not have in the past been brought to you by Pfizer, then they got to make sure that their villain, gets cast in the correct light. And whether or not they're, sponsored by Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, whatever it might be.
What?
When you go up against some of those powers that be, you put yourself in the crosshairs, they're going to paint you in a certain way. And that's what the media did to me a couple of years ago. That's fine. That's their prerogative. That's what they want to do.
That was Green Bay Packers star quarterback Aaron Rodgers. In case you forgot, back in 2021, Rodgers infamously told reporters he was immunized when asked whether he was vaccinated against COVID-19. And what happened with him was, and then he got COVID. And so some people were upset with him because they thought he had implied that he was vaccinated when he said immunized. What he actually meant by that is he was taking products that he thought would improve his health, give him the best possible case for not getting COVID or for having an easy bout with COVID, but not specifically vaccination. And then he was kind of portrayed as like an anti-vax person. And now, of course, we know getting vaccinated doesn't stop you from getting COVID, as even the good standing health experts have had to concede. But he really was, he's clearly took it rather personally, but he really was demonized by a lot of the media for not supposedly modeling good behavior and just getting vaccinated. Most NFL athletes did. So I understand why he's upset, because it didn't end up stopping you from getting COVID.
Yeah, well, he said in this interview that, he doesn't see himself as a victim. It seems like he was able to continue playing, unlike what happened in certain other sports. I know that we covered various international tennis players who weren't allowed into the country because of their vaccination status. And other leagues, it seems, had more strict requirements for people being vaccinated than apparently the NFL did. So, and it looks like he came through his bout of COVID unscathed, and all is well that ends well. I don't know. I understand that a lot of people are very frustrated that they felt stigmatized at a time when it was not acceptable. You could get banned from social media even for saying things about how one's own vaccination status doesn't at all prevent you from getting COVID, or doesn't have the same preventative effect with respect to spreading COVID. Like, I understand all of that. I guess my question is, are we living in a world where we're going to have an interminable amount of COVID identity politics for people who feel aggrieved from that period of time? Because I do feel like a lot of us were collectively misled. Whether or not you complied or didn't comply, there was a lot of misleading stuff out there that people in good faith got caught up in. And I don't know. I don't even know how I'm supposed to feel about this.
Well, I think people maybe like Aaron Rodgers, or who are in his position, if not him specifically, are feeling a little bit like it's time for turnabout is fair play. That now there is a much broader acceptance that the vaccines are not stopping cases. Maybe the protection is much more short term than the experts promised. And so on and so forth, and they're feeling like they were really stigmatized, and the people doing that ended up being much more wrong than they thought they would be. And it's now is the time for, you made me out to be like some nutcase for being hesitant about this, or not thinking it was necessary. Maybe if I'd already had COVID and I didn't want to get jabbed, and you portrayed me, you the amorphous, faceless public health bureaucracy. The mainstream media.
Who is the we specifically? Because
I think it's the mainstream media.
If the point is that people want some kind of apology from the folks that did stigmatize them, I think that's completely fair, or at least some recognition.
I think they want acknowledgement.
Yeah, some recognition that they were in the wrong. I think that's completely fair, but from whom is that requested or demanded or desired? And I would love us to get to a place where we can get that reckoning, because I think those kinds of reckonings and accountability moments are in fact important. But the diffuse kind of I was marginalized and everyone else is to blame, and it feels a little bit like, I gotta say, the frustration that conservatives have historically had with victim so-called victim culture, where it does seem to be a kind of a clout mechanism that people are using now. I was right about this. I'm like, and I get it. I completely get it. Like, if you were the one who was the squeaky wheel, who had to put up with all of the slings and arrows, and maybe even face professional consequences, I understand that you want an apology, you want reckoning, and I think that you should get it. But I think it should be demanded from the people that you want it from, because otherwise we get into this weird, endless cycle of grievance, and I'm not sure where it's going. Because there's a lot of stuff to still be aggrieved about. Other countries are spending so much more time protecting people by installing air ventilation systems. We just saw at Davos that all of those rich people who know a lot had all the secret information about the vaccine and what it could and couldn't do, all of them used an enormous amount of COVID protections at their conference to protect themselves, not just requiring PCR tests, but having the high-tech air cleaning systems, having UV lights in all of their rooms. And we're not demanding any of that for ourselves, even if you don't want to be vaccinated, all of these other kind of interventions that can help keep people safe. It's for the rich, but not for us, while we're still griping about stuff that is now out of our control and no longer law.
Yeah, it's weird what we do and what we not do. Right. So we're not doing as much on those fronts, and then on other fronts, we're more militant. Other countries have, like I think most of our peer countries have dropped the vaccine requirement to come to the country. Canada doesn't have a vaccine requirement to come to the country, and we do. Progressive utopia Canada doesn't have that policy. We do.
Yeah,
it's true. It's broadly true of Europe. It's crazy.
So I'm completely on board. I guess I'm going to distill this point. It's not that I have a problem with the grievance. It's that sometimes I worry that being stuck in this point in the past is keeping us from advocating for things that we should be advocating for going forward, and is constructively letting the government off the hook for doing absolutely nothing now.
And it wasn't just stigmatization, though. I mean, the Biden administration did attempt to require millions of workers to get vaccinated. Many officials in many cities attempted to force school children to be vaccinated to go to the school. It wasn't just a poo-pooing and people are annoyed that they were looked down. There was actual attempt to make them. And then there was there was people like Leanna Wen before she had her really, really dramatic and I think praiseworthy turn of, I think when important people change their mind into your direction, you should welcome them in. It's a good practice. But people like her, would say things like, well, the unvaccinated, they have a right not to be vaccinated, but they need to stay in their homes. We can't have them on public transportation, like they're lepers or something. It went pretty far in a lot of corners, again, of the mainstream media, of the health expert class, the way they were talking about people as unclean if they were unvaccinated. That was really pretty gross.
Yeah, and
is getting forgotten as those people accept, and we all accept that, it doesn't matter for public health, really, whether you're vaccinated. The debate is about for your own health, because it's not deterring cases.
People should talk about that, and people should talk about their evolving opinions, and they should talk about why their opinions evolved, because I do think, I don't know about Leanna Wen, she seems to be in a position to be relatively well-informed, and was in the position of educating the rest of the public, ostensibly, about COVID issues. But the rest of us were told for a year, at least, that getting vaccinated, very clearly from the highest authorities, that getting vaccinated helped bring down transmission rates, and that we were doing this to protect other people, not just yourself. That was the rationale that induced a lot of people to adopt a lot of the stigmatizing attitudes toward people who weren't vaccinated. And that's not to say it was good, or people shouldn't feel bad about being in that position. But I do think it's important to focus on who was spreading that kind of ground
but
zero.
But some people said all along. Some people all along said that's not going to be true. It's not. They said look specifically at what the authorization is for. They're not actually making any promises on paper. The lofty rhetoric might be saying that, but on paper they're not making any promises about cases. So there were people who were on the show. There were people who have been stigmatized. Alex Berenson, I argued with him, and he ended up being right about that. I still disagree with him on other aspects of it, but some people did call that right.
Yeah, for sure. I just, I want the accountability to be demanded from the people that it would be meaningful from, and also for us to be able to do something with this grievance energy, because I think it's important and good. I think it's good that the people, in New York who were all fired for not getting vaccinated got their back pay. I think it's good for people to get concrete retribution for harms that were actually incurred. But at a certain point, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with stories like this.
We're going to talk, I think, in a little bit more about New York workers and non-vaccine compliance and what the governor had to say about that. Very interesting. And we'll have more Rising right after this.